Hello, everyone, and thanks very much for joining me for this event. My name is Martin Stepek, and I've been practicing mindfulness, or I think of it as living mindfully or mindful living, for over 20 years, and I've been teaching it since 2004. But never in that period of time, of course, have we had something so unique and destructive and disruptive as the coronavirus. So this talk and session I want to do is essentially mindfulness as a way of not just coping with anxiety and stress, but hopefully still being able to be full of life and enjoy being alive during this pandemic. Now, in preparation for this, we asked for questions. So we've got questions coming from a lovely range of beautiful places that I know well. So from Alexandria, Dumbarton, Balloch, Helensburgh, and from a lot of people who didn't say where they were from. So what I'll want to do is I'll thread in those questions through my narrative about what mindfulness is, what's anxiety, what's stress, and how we can handle these things in the current situation. So let's start with what is mindfulness, and it ties in immediately with a lovely question that someone asked, which is, I'm not sure if I should be doing mindfulness or meditation. Would you recommend both? Now that's a very common question because the two are often treated as if they're the same thing. And it's not really an academic point, this is a very practical point. Mindfulness is a skill or a human quality, just in the same way as, if you like, anger is, or the ability to speak is. Mindfulness is just the ability to notice. At its most basic level, that's all it is. It's the ability to notice. Where it becomes specialist and helpful is in two ways: what we are asked to notice and how we're asked to notice it. So, say a typical day. Most people, I guess, I hope it's not just me, will at some point look out the window or look at their phone or watch the TV for the weather and say, oh, it's a lovely day, or it's going to be a lovely day today. Or, oh no, it's miserable weather again. Now, that's based on an observation. So that's being mindful, you've noticed it. But it's instant. You just look at it for a second, you have a thought about it, good or bad, and then you're on with the next thing, the next thought. What mindfulness says is try to deliberately notice. Try and notice the bigger picture of it all and to linger with it. So if you look out the window and say, like today when I happen to be recording this, it's not raining, but it has been earlier this morning, and it's still mostly cloudy out there. There's no blue in the sky, and you can see all the reflections of the earlier rain on the road, on the pavement, and on a couple of puddles. Now, with mindfulness, that's what it asks you to do. It says, notice these qualities. Notice it's not just, it's a horrible day, but actually some of the light glinting off the earlier rain is quite striking, it's quite beautiful. And there's still trees out there with light and shade. The clouds are not all one uniform grey. There's light grey, there's white, and you can discern some of the shapes of the clouds. And when you provide your mind with that attention, so this is the what you do with mindfulness, you are becoming more appreciative of the detail and the subtlety of what you see, what you hear, what you think, what you feel, and what you smell, what you taste, all the senses and your thoughts and your emotions. And as you get more appreciative of the detail, you actually start to glean more from a moment. So you're looking out, instead of saying it's a miserable day, you say, oh, actually, that's really pretty, that part there. and that's nice in the way the breeze is blowing the remaining leaves, then you start to feel better about the day than your initial thought, which is, oh, it's miserable. So mindfulness is just nurturing and developing this skill of noticing. But there's another aspect to it, which is you try to develop what seems to be a paradox in the methods. And you get this with training, so you don't have to read about it, you don't have to think too much about it, you just keep practicing and it comes. And that's to keep your attention very light. So you're not concentrating heavily, you're not furrowed your brows like that. We talk about concentrating hard, or focusing strongly on something, those kind of almost like macho words. What with mindfulness was asking us to do is keep the mind as light as possible, just relaxed, but while noticing clearly. So it's clear but light, so it's not draining, but it's, forgive the pun, kind of enlightening. And when we practice that way, we get better at it. And when we get better at it, we gain more and more that's good in life into us, which makes us happier. And we're able to notice, and we'll come obviously to anxiety and stress and the negatives shortly, but we're able to notice the negatives and manage them because we're noticing it more deliberately and more acutely. Excuse me. So that's what mindfulness is. It's a skill or a quality. And one of the ways we can develop our mindfulness, not by any means the only way, but one of the ways we can develop our mindfulness is through a kind of meditative practice. And I've got mixed feelings about this. There's a brilliant book called What the Buddha Taught by a Sri Lankan monk in the 1950s. Still available, and it's recommended. And he said that the translation meditation from the original word was a rotten translation. The word was bhavana, and it's in an ancient Indian language called Pali. And what it meant was to cultivate the mind. So, in crass commercial terms, recently it's been called brain training. And while I don't quite subscribe to that term, it's a bit overly in your face. It is essentially that. It's training the mind, and especially training our ability to notice and manage emotions. So this word bhavana was mental culture, mental cultivation, mental development. And the form of meditation that was used in those days was in order to develop this ability to be mindful. And from this ability to be mindful, when you're sitting quietly, almost like in the classic meditative state of eyes closed and noticing, you start to gain insights. Now, these insights are just straightforward. Is when you close your eyes and notice your breath, it feels peaceful. Boom, that's an insight. Well, that's nice, I'll do that again, because it was good. On the other hand, you might notice that your mind wanders 3 times in 30 seconds, and you realise, I've got a volatile mind. And the practice says, well, when you've got a volatile mind, keep taking it back to something better, even if it bounces back to the distraction again. And so you start to gain the insight that if you keep doing this, it actually works. And you don't get so caught up, you don't get so fraught with the emotions that are arising and distracting you. So, summarising that, mindfulness is a quality. It's a skill that we can learn in the exact same way as you learn to ride a bike when you're a kid, or you learn to walk, as a toddler. Well, how do you learn to walk? How do you learn to ride a bike? Unfortunately, it's not that easy. You try to stand up and you fall down. You try and go on the bike without the stabilisers and you fall off it. And you keep doing it, and eventually the body and the brain and the mind together start to understand what you're trying to do in terms of balance on a bike or balance on 2 legs. And it slowly comes together and boom, all of a sudden you can do it beautifully well. And learning mindfulness is a similar process. You keep doing it and you get better at it. So you get better at noticing, you get better at dealing with distractions, you get better at noticing your emotions and not getting caught up in them. You're getting better at noticing emotions and taking your mind somewhere else. Not suppressing the emotion, I'll come back to that, but just gently taking it somewhere else. So say all of a sudden I'm recording this, about 10 minutes into it, and somebody comes in this room door and says, "Hi Martin, I need to go out." And I'm thinking, I'm in the middle of recording this. That's anger, that's irritation or frustration. Now, if I'm mindful, which I am hopefully a lot of the time, not always though, I'll notice that anger arising, regardless of what it means for the recording. I'll notice the anger and I'll notice that it's unpleasant and unhelpful. And I'll just breathe in slowly and gently and then breathe back out slowly but gently. And the anger's gone or going away. So I have handled a bout of anger based on a trivial incident. So this is what we're learning with mindfulness, is how to deal with the negative emotions as they arise by noticing and then changing tack. And there's not many great economists, I guess, in my view, but the great economist and psychologist who won the Nobel Prize for Economics, Daniel Kahneman, once summarised happiness as where you allocate your attention. Where you put your mind, or where your mind puts you, will determine whether you're happy or not. And that example I just gave shows that. If I got caught up in the anger and shouted, the person coming in and said, "I'm trying to do a recording, I'm going to have to stop it now, press the stop button. Now I'm going to have to restart it, and I've got other things to do today. And you knew I was going to do this at this time, and that then spirals into thought after thought after thought, all negative. But instead, I allocate my attention away from the anger and the cause of the anger and just think, an in-breath is beautiful. Now, that's a daft thing to say, but it is. If you just notice it, it's so lovely and clear and fresh. And an out-breath, so quiet, so subtle and so peaceful that the anger can't really compete with it with practice. Now, extrapolate that. Think of that and the ability to do that. And I don't know anyone who can do this all the time. But imagine that somebody could do this all the time. Every moment of their waking day, every day of their life from now on. That means they will not get caught up in any negative emotion ever for the rest of their life. So that's the kind of pinnacle of where this can take us. And I've heard the Dalai Lama speak. I've met him personally, which was a great honour. Great Vietnamese Buddhist monk like Thich Nhat Hanh. I've heard Professor Mark Williams and Dr. Joy Kabat-Zinn. These are the founding people of modern mindfulness in terms of their scientific approach to it. And they all admit that they get annoyed at times. So nobody gets perfection in this. But we move in that direction. We get less fraught, less caught up, less strained, less stressed, less anxious. And what takes its place? Calmness, contentment, just enjoyment of the simple things of life. So it's very beautiful as a practice. And it makes you happier. Not just happier, but you make better decisions if you've got a clear, calm mind. So your life becomes better because you're happier and because you make better decisions for yourself and for those around you. So meditation is a practice where we take our mind and reflect on something, or we hold our attention on something. And there are hundreds of different types of meditation from all sorts of philosophical traditions, religious traditions, and secular scientific perspectives. So my view is that a particular type of meditation, mindful meditation, helps develop mindfulness. And it certainly speeds it up and deepens it, in my experience. Some people don't feel comfortable with meditative practices, either for personal reasons, because they have got maybe a blocked nose, they've got asthma or something like that, and don't like to focus on the breath. They find that the mind is just too distracting. So what they can do is mindful walking, or mindful eating, or mindful drinking. In other words, you notice what you're doing in those moments deliberately, and you cultivate it that way. But the meditative way, if you don't have a problem with it, is the best way. The other thing that people don't want to do, meditation, indeed sometimes mindfulness, similar with yoga, is because it comes from an Eastern philosophy or tradition, and they are brought up in a Christian tradition, Catholic Church, Church of Scotland, Baptists, Episcopalian, whichever version, same with Islam, and Judaism. Even ironically, even though they have got all their reflective and meditative practices, but because it comes and it's associated with Hinduism and Buddhism in its origins, then mindfulness and meditation are considered almost like, don't do that, that's the bad guys, we're in competition with one another. Obviously, I don't agree with that, and I've taught senior nuns and priests mindfulness and ministers, so that's a political thing within each tradition. So just in case you're interested in that. And someone actually asked the question, I'm just looking just now, are you heavily influenced by Eastern philosophy? And the answer to that is, simple answer is yes. The more complex answer and the more accurate answer is, well. So yes, I have loads of Eastern philosophy books, but I've also got the Quran, I've got the Bible in the house, I've got virtually every scientific book that's been written on mindfulness. But so I am influenced by Eastern philosophy probably more than most folk, because most folk in the UK, Europe even, aren't influenced at all by Eastern philosophy, at least not in a direct study way. The more complex answer is, and this gets to the heart of mindfulness, is every single moment you are influenced by your life experiences. So the parents who brought you up, if your parents brought you up, or the carers who brought you up, the school you went to, primary school, the secondary school you went to, the pals you met and played with in the street as a child, what you went on to do after school, whether that's straight to work or college or university, and then meeting your first girlfriend, breaking up with your first girlfriend, all that sort of thing, they all influence you. This is called neuroplasticity, that every single experience you have adds to the sum total of who you are, and that influences how you feel about life. So in that sense, I would say that my studies of Eastern philosophy probably equate to certainly single figures of what's influencing my life, and my upbringing, being born to a Polish, Irish, Scottish family, was Catholic, and for the first 12 years of my life that was a daily influence on me, at home, at school and at church. So I would say in relative terms it's a much higher influence than on me, whether I wanted it or not, because I was a child at the time. So yes, I'm influenced by Eastern philosophy, because mindfulness originates in Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. So summing that up, mindfulness is a skill. It's a quality of mind that we can develop. And when we develop it, it helps us deal with negatives, negative emotions, negative experiences, negative situations. It also helps us get the most from moments, like that one there that you probably didn't even notice. I'll do it again then, sipping water. To take a sip of water is one of life's great events, which sounds daft, but it is. It's certainly one of the most important things you do, probably the most important thing you have to do deliberately to keep you alive. But I can feel the cold water through the ceramic of this mug, and it's beautiful to my fingertips. But you have to be there, mindful, to notice it. It's also a gift that a group of people that I taught mindfulness to several years ago gave to me, because I happened to mention in the course that I'd worked in Australia and for a short period with some Indigenous Australians, and so they got me this as a painting by Indigenous Australians. So for all those reasons, those few seconds was a joy to me. And that sounds daft. I mean, in normal everyday life, to say taking a sip of water is a joyous thing sounds daft, but this is what mindfulness brings to you. And it's not an exaggeration to say it's a joyous thing. That's a realisation that I get that water from a tap and it's pure, and I can trust that the water's pure and it keeps me alive every day. I should be joyous. I should be grateful. I should be so appreciative that this is available to me. I worked my way around the world for 4 years, and I went to places where they had no electricity and no running water, and you had to hope that the water in the well was pure. And there are millions upon millions upon millions of people in that situation, whether because their villages haven't developed enough economically, or because they used to have it but it's been bombed to smithereens like in Syria or Yemen. So this is what mindfulness is. It's the ability to notice, and from that a million gifts come to you. But you have to work hard at this. This is a lifelong practice. I do my mindfulness first thing in the morning. I've already done it. I'll do it again this evening. And I'll do many versions of it. 6, 10 times a day. And I'll try and walk mindfully. When I'm walking, I don't mean going for a walk. I mean walking along the hall to go to the living room. When I put on the kettle, I'll try to do it mindfully. When I make my wife a cup of coffee or tea, when I remember to do so, then I'll try to do it mindfully by noticing, smelling the coffee, noticing that my hands can grip a coffee jar, so things like that. And it's not difficult, but it's hard to remember to do. So let's move on to anxiety and stress. They're not the same thing, but in mindfulness terms, they are much the same thing. So, classic mindfulness perspective on anxiety and stress, and all the other negative emotions like anger, irritation, and the kind of semi ones like impatience, boredom, frustration, and all the good ones, happiness, joy, love, laughter, humour, giving. They're all just products of a mind that has evolved to produce stuff like that, either under certain circumstances or just at random. We've evolved to be like this. We've evolved to have this array of emotions. And evolutionary psychologists, there is a branch of science called that, they reason that these are millions upon millions of years old, these qualities in our mind, the emotions, the emotional reactions, and that they help to survive in earlier, more dangerous, more natural times. So anger helps you survive. If you're in danger with someone's going to attack you, you can attack first if you're angry. Fear also helps. This is fight or flight. So you run away if someone's going to attack you. And you've got more speed in your legs because the fear has produced hormones to help you do that. Even depression, where your body tells you something's not right, and so it tells your mind to feel terrible about life, so you hide in the corner of a cave until you feel better. And anxiety is one of those. This idea that something could go wrong at any point in life, that's a true statement. Something could go wrong at any time in life. I mean, a meteor might just come down and stop this recording because it hammers me. My wife might have forgotten to turn off the tap and the plug's in, and all of a sudden it drips in my head. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to be anxious. Just because anything might happen at any point could lead us to be anxious all the time. And so that's a kind of overreaction. So anxiety is partly genetic. So some people have just got that program more likely to switch on than others. That's just called bad luck. And luck plays a large part in our life. Chance, fate, you name it, whatever you call it. But for most people, anxiety is triggered by maybe a series or a growing amount of concerns. So worry sometimes develops into anxiety. And all we can do with anxiety is, from the mindfulness point of view, is notice it, take the attention somewhere else. And that's quite hard. So we'll come back to that. Stress is slightly different. It's, again, an accumulation. We've got phrases for it. It's the last straw. I'm at the end of my tether. And these are all agricultural or sort of practical working things. The last straw is the straw that breaks the camel's back. So you're taking something and it's too much and all of a sudden everything falls down. And that's what stress can feel like. But it's the same process from a mindfulness point of view. These are all just things that arise, and their purpose or goal is to notice that they've arisen and take the attention to something that allows those emotions to gently fall back down into the mind, unignited. So we ignite emotions when they arise by believing in them, catching on to them, and then propelling a whole series of other thoughts about the subject. If we can just gently take the attention to somewhere else, like the breath, like your feet on the ground, like looking out the window, just saying to yourself, it's actually a really nice day, and allow the anxiety or the stress or the other negative emotion to just gently fade away again, then we can win it over. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. This takes practice, and depending on your luck factor, it can take days of practice, weeks of practice, months of practice, or years of practice. But it does eventually start to change the way your mind creates negative emotions and how often it does and how quickly you can resolve that. Now, a lady in Helensburgh says, as well as mindfulness, are there other techniques you think people should use to deal with anxiety? Yes, I think there's a whole series of them. It's probably better just simply Googling, especially Googling with the NHS choices. It's a brilliant site. But the most common one is cognitive behavioural therapy, which in essence is very similar to mindfulness. And Oxford University created mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, under Professor Mark Williams. And it's worth looking at. If you just Google Oxford mindfulness, it's an amazing site, and of course, being Oxford University, is world-class research and science. But in essence, the cognitive behavioural therapy is to gently challenge what your mind tells you and progressively move in a challenging way against it. I'll give an example of that. So, say you're scared of leaving the house, and the therapist says, well, try just opening the door and not going out the house. Did anything terrible happen? And you try it, and you gain the rational understanding that nothing terrible happened, and you kind of tick that box. Yeah, nothing happened. That's good. At least I can open the door. And then the next step is go out onto the doorstep. So you're now outside. Has the meteor hit you? Have bandits come and taken you away, kidnapped you? Whatever. And so on. It tries to take baby steps with you so that you start to see that your anxiety is irrational in that step. And then eventually, hopefully, progresses. Now, I'm not a cognitive behavioural therapist, so That's the general perspective. But I think it's good. I think also, someone else asked the question, how can you use the natural world to relieve anxiety or stress? And this is beautiful because it ties immediately into mindfulness, and it ties into the evolutionary theory about the mind. We were not born, sorry, that's not true, we were born to live in towns and cities. We had not evolved to live in towns and cities. For the vast bulk of our evolutionary period, which is billions of years, going back to the first form of life on Earth, we have evolved to adapt to survive in nature. And by nature, well, you know what nature means, but I'll put it just in blunt terms. All sorts of weather, all sorts of environments, deserts, mountains, wetlands, lochs, marshes, you name it. Life has evolved to adapt to survive in these different climes, in these different places. And part of the evolution, fortunately for us, because it would be miserable if we didn't, is we have grown to like being in nature, except for at the extremes. So, and that's an obvious, when you think about it, an obvious evolution. If you adapt to like where you are, then you're more likely to be happy, and happiness has evolved to create positive hormones in us that make us live longer and make us stronger and healthier. Whereas negative emotions tend to wear out the body and make us live a shorter life and basically kill us off. So it's a natural thing for a human being to enjoy being in nature, even if we don't realise it when we're in there. Things are happening to us because of what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're smelling, even if we can't smell the smell consciously. It's still going in and adapting, affecting us. So nature is increasingly useful and enjoyable. It's an acquired taste, like everything is an acquired taste. You have to try it to enjoy it, and you have to keep doing it to enjoy it more. So you could be walking in nature the first time and think, I hate this, I know it's meant to be good for me, but I hate this. But it's actually doing things in you, and you're starting to see unconsciously and hear unconsciously the bird song and see the clouds and start to see the colours of the changing seasons, and slowly but surely it sneaks up on you and you start to think, I like this. And then you start to think, I love this. And then you start to think, I want to care for this. And this just develops in us. And that eases and soothes anxiety and stress. So I would urge people, I go out 3 times a day for a walk just around the block. So I see people's gardens, or outside there's a kind of wilderness area and there's a burn nearby. Just 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but I do it first thing in the morning, kind of break time or lunch time, and then depending on time of year, because of the nights drawing in and the longer days over the different seasons, sometime early evening, late afternoon, or later in the day if it's summertime. And I'm not doing anything there. I'm just doing this to be in nature, because I know that what I see and what I hear just fills me with the right stuff to be alive. Someone else has asked, do I think it's better to try and cope with anxiety and stress by using mindfulness before seeking medical intervention? I'm a great fan of medical intervention. My dad is alive because of medical intervention. My mum was alive because of medical intervention. Medicines are amazing. They're astonishing. Yes, some of them have their downsides. Some of them are maybe pushed more quickly than others. Some people are kept on certain medicines too long without being checked, but that's maybe more an administrative thing. And obviously some people have side effects, and that has to be all taken into account. But generally speaking, our lives are so much better for medicine. So I'm a real supporter of using medicine. That said, to answer your question, is it better to try and cope with anxiety and stress by using mindfulness before medicine? I would say, generally speaking, unless it's really extreme, then yes, to try to not just cope, but manage and be happy despite having anxiety or stress on your own with your own body and mind is clearly a better way of doing it than having to resort to medicines, because medicines are putting chemicals inside the body, and that's a complex arrangement. So I would say that all else being equal, if it's relatively mild anxiety or stress, then try it. Try mindfulness, try mindful walking, try mindful being in nature, try mindful eating, try mindful everything, because mindfulness is noticing what's going on in the present moment. So in the present moment, you're either doing something or you're not. You're seeing something, you're hearing something, and just be in those moments. But don't discard the idea of medicine because it's not, quotation marks, natural. Take good care of yourself in that regard. And if you feel that you need the help for medicine, absolutely take it. As I say, I am so grateful for the brilliant scientists and researchers who have produced all these things. I mean, I very rarely get headaches, for example, but if I get a headache, I say, thank you to all you dead scientists who created paracetamol, for example. You know, and I've got a smashed knee from football days from decades ago, and so my knee sometimes gets inflamed, and ibuprofen helps it. It's just wonderful to have this. So, yes, use medicines, but if it's mild, try it and see if you can not just cope. Coping is not good enough for a life. Life is to be enjoyed. Life is to be amazed at. You should feel awe at times being alive. And at normal moments, all else being equal, you should be content and at peace. And if you're not that way because of anxiety or stress, then and it's not helping by doing a mindfulness practice or similar practices, then certainly take medicines to help you. So how do we use this mindfulness? How does it work in terms of building up? I think the most important thing to me about mindfulness, there's two parts to it. One is helping you cope initially with negatives. But mindfulness is useful for billions of people who don't have any problems because it makes you happier. It builds up positive qualities. I want to touch on that briefly. So mindfulness builds up your emotion that relates to what you've just noticed. So if you notice something negative like the weather and you decide to take your attention instead to the breath, then you're no longer building up your moodiness because of the weather, but instead you're building up inside yourself the pleasure that associated with breathing. Now, if you do that for a few minutes every day for several years, then all of a sudden you've got this real depth of experience of enjoying breathing. And you have starved the automatic mindset that says, oh, miserable weather. So your grumpiness goes down and your happiness goes up. My very simplistic analogy of this in the human brain is that you've got two buckets where all your experiences go. They go into one or the other. Is it a good bucket or is it a bad bucket experience? Breathing and noticing that breathing is pleasant, or hearing birdsong and thinking that's a beautiful song, that goes in the good bucket. That's a good experience. Looking at the weather and saying, oh, it's miserable again today. Why Scotland always get the rain. That goes in the bad bucket. And how you feel about life and what arises from your mind automatically can only depend on what's in those buckets. There's nothing else it can come from. And those buckets also contain your happy genes, if you like, and your negative genes. So that's all the source of your responses to life. So in my wee world, thinking about mindfulness, my view is keep putting stuff in the good bucket. Not just because that's a better moment for you in that moment, but you're building up what I think of as a positive resilience. Life brings its woes. We're living in a coronavirus. People we know and love may have died. My aunt died, aged 100, in a care home, not of coronavirus, but in April. And there were restrictions on funeral, quite rightly. Another aunt of mine, my dad's sister, who I loved dearly, died 6 months earlier. My sister died 6 months earlier from that, and my brother died 6 months earlier from that. So this is part of life. People you love die. We get ill. People we love get ill. We get older. We get aches and pains. News comes on that is shocking or terrible. People get elected we don't like. Things like that happen. That's part of life. We can't change that, and we can't run away from it. But what we can do is build up these positive qualities of mind, like happiness, kindness, love, tolerance, a much more broader and deeper view of being alive and what life is all about. And we slowly build these up moment by moment by moment into a good bucket, while at the same time simultaneously starving the negative qualities that pop up from the bad bucket. So we have a negativity bias. According to psychology, we are more likely to be negative than positive by a factor of 3 to 1. But if we do this work of mindfulness and we put stuff in a good bucket and we slowly but surely take stuff out the bad bucket, then we can maybe tilt that to 2 to 1, then 50-50, then maybe 2 to 1 positive feelings to negative, then maybe 3 to 1. In theory, as I mentioned earlier, maybe we get to the point where everything in our mind now is 100% in the good bucket and we've drained everything out the negative. In which case we are perfectly happy regardless of getting old, regardless of getting sick, regardless of losing people we love. And I've noticed that I am, all else being equal, a very happy person. And that's despite losing 4 people I loved in the last 2 years. People I really loved, really, really loved, especially 3 of them. And 6 years earlier to that, I lost both my parents in a 3-week period. That's a lot for a human being to take, unless your mind is ready for that sort of thing, not in a gloomy, morbid way, but in a, yeah, that happens in life, and it's okay that that happens in life, because I've still got life, and I'll live my life more fully in honour of those people who no longer have life. This is what mindfulness can bring to us. We have a joy of life that is beyond just ourselves. It also makes us much more altruistic-minded, kind-hearted. We're more likely to do things for others than for ourselves because we quickly realise with a clear, mindful mind that we've got enough. Why do we need that other thing? Why do we need a bigger this, a bigger that, and a newer this? Life is good. That means that we can spend more time doing things for others rather than working to get more and more money. Or we can decide that we will help more people in our work. So we change job, which is how I got to do mindfulness back in 2004. So let's just summarise this. You've been very patient. Mindfulness is a trait and a skill that we can develop through regular practice. And we'll finish with a very short couple of minute practice, which is meditative in mind. It helps nurture good qualities in our mind, and it helps us manage and slowly wither negative qualities in our mind. Two of those qualities happen to be anxiety and stress, but from a mindfulness point of view, they're all the same stuff. They're the same as happiness, they're the same as hatred, they're the same as prejudice, they're the same as love. They're just things that we've evolved that pop up or develop in us. The good ones we don't need to do anything about except for make the most of. The bad ones are what we need to deal with, and we deal with it by noticing and changing attention. So let's do a very short practice. This will just be 2 or 3 minutes. We sit a particular way just because it helps us be a bit more alert and also to notice better. But if you're doing this lying down in bed, on the phone, whatever, that's okay. You don't really need to change your position. But the classic modern position, the old position is obviously cross-legged and stuff like that. But sit on your chair, feet flat on the floor if you can, smother the back in against the back of your chair, your back nice and upright so you're feeling alert and alive. One hand on top of the other, thumbs gently touching, placed in your lap. Don't worry too much about the detail of this, just generally speaking. Now dip your head down a little and gently close your eyes. Slow your breath down to about half its normal pace and place your attention just inside the nostrils. And start to notice the air flowing in slowly and gently. And then obviously back out slowly and gently. So if your mind wanders off, that's okay, we just accept it. We don't get annoyed at it. We don't think we're not doing it properly. But once that's happened, just kind of mentally smile to it, as if we know that that's what the mind does, and then just take the attention back to the breathing. And just start to notice the qualities of a breath. Breathing in is fresh and clear. Seems to almost clear the mind. Breathing out is very quiet, which for most people means quite peaceful. So now, from listening to me talk about mindfulness, we're now experiencing an everyday sensation. It's very important to our life, but we probably haven't noticed much before in the past. And it's lovely and clear and fresh breathing in when we just notice it. Especially if we slow down the breath and if we deepen the breath so it lasts a bit longer. And it's beautifully quiet and peaceful breathing out. So in these moments, as you continue to notice the breath, you are experiencing, firstly, a series of moments that are pleasant, that clear the mind and makes you feel refreshed. All positive experiences in your life just now. And then when you breathe out, you have a series of moments where your mind, and therefore your life, is quiet and peaceful. To be refreshed, and then peaceful, and then refreshed, and then peaceful, is a really good set of experiences for your life. So they're going into your good bucket. Anytime you're distracted, possible bad bucket, you notice it, you smile at it, so you don't add to the bad bucket by being irritated or annoyed, and then you take the attention back, breathing in cool and fresh, breathing out it's quiet and it's peaceful, and you're now adding again to the good bucket, and your moments are peaceful and refreshing. What more can you want in life? Now take the attention to your eyelids and notice them, and they're peaceful. and they're very gentle. So when you notice your eyelids peaceful and gentle, your mind becomes peaceful and gentle, because your mind reflects what you notice. So that's going in the good bucket. And now, giving them a minute or so, just allow the eyelids to very softly, very slowly start to open. And as they do, keep your eyes downward gazed, unfocused, away from the glare of your screen when your eyes begin to open. And just trust your eyes to return to normal in their own time and in their own way. So don't force it or rush it. Let it happen naturally. And meanwhile, just continue to enjoy the quietness and the refreshing feeling in your mind as you slowly come out of the session. So that's me out of my practice. It's just a few minutes, but it was refreshing. And it was peaceful for me, personally. I hope it was for you. There's no need to rush out if your eyes are still closed and you're slowly coming out. Just take your time with that. So thank you very much for listening and participating in this. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you have any further questions, then please feel free to get in touch with me. The beauty of my name is that nobody else has got it. So if you Google Martin Stepek, then you'll find me. We have an organisation called 10 for Zen. You can look that up, and we have a whole lot of free things on our website. I think really high quality, ongoing support and freely available for people as well. And if you're still further interested, if you go to Amazon, I've written 6 books on mindfulness. So if you just Google my name and mindfulness, you'll find them there. And my colleague Morna Laird has written just recently a very beautiful book of children's stories, to which I've added short mindfulness practices. So if you again, you'll find it on my name, because I'm in there as a co-author because of the mindfulness. So thank you all very much. Have a lovely rest of the day, whatever time of day you're watching this. And thanks again to West Dunbartonshire Council for their support and for inviting me to do this talk. Take care and keep well. My eyes are now just going to dart to one side to stop this video. Thank you. Keep well. Bye.